Hey there, Station One listeners, and welcome to another episode. That's right, we are back, and we've got a great one for you tonight. We are going to be talking about The Last of Us, not the video game, but the TV series, which just filmed its first season. And wow, that was just amazing. It was more than I expected. I don't know what I expected, but we'll get into it with a fine group of people. As always, if you haven't watched season one or played the video game of it, you could do either or, because they followed pretty much the same storyline. We are going to be spoiling the hell out of this one, folks. So please, 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 if you get a chance, please, take a break, stop right here, don't go any further, because after we start getting to this, you will not ever want to touch a mushroom pizza ever again. I promise you. I promise you. And if you don't know what we're talking about, watch the show. Come on, folks. Please, please, please. All right, let's get started on this. We would love to hear from you guys at home. We got, we said feedback at earthstation1.com is the best way to get in touch with us. Please, let us know what you guys thought of Last of Us. It was our first experiences with it. We have one expert here, and he always pretends he's the expert at least. So it's gonna be a ton of fun to talk all about it. Let's say hey to Matt Sweatman.
Hi, guys.
How are you, Matt?
I'm doing great.
Good to have you back again. It's always great to
Yes.
see you.
Yes.
It
Y'all
almost feels
shouldn't
like you
have
were
to.
here for our last episode. It was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Y'all wouldn't let me leave. I tried to go out
I,
the airlock and y'all just, no, no, no. We got you a cot set up. We're going to have to stay here for another
yeah,
episode.
exactly. We got Elaine's permission to keep you here as long as we want, so it's okay.
Oh, yeah. She's having a blast back home, I'm sure.
I'm sure. We're also joined by, it's been actually quite some time, Jennifer Weiss. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. It's always good to see you. And we are also joined once again by Hanako. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. It's been almost a month now or so since you've last been on the show.
Maybe a little bit more, but yes, thank you for
Yeah,
having me back.
it's definitely great to have you back. And it's interesting because you were the first person to reach out when I posted that we were looking for folks to talk about it. And it had that much effect on a lot of people.
Mhm.
And, when they announced that they were making a series based off the video game of this, because I've heard about people talking about the video game for years now, and how powerful it was, and people already had spoiled some of the ending for it to me, so I knew what was to come, but I don't think anyone could have prepared you for what we actually got and everything, which was kind of neat. Let's go around the bend. Matt, like I was teasing at the beginning of the show, you've played the game. What was your reaction when you heard about the TV series?
The the video game is such an experience. You never quite process it. And I thought, okay, well, here's another opportunity possibly to process all the moral dilemmas from the first game. Um, at first, Elaine wasn't too keen on watching it, but as we got closer and the buzz started generating, she decided to check it out, and very quickly she was hooked. And it was a joy to see it through her eyes. And it was, I don't know that I processed it any better though. It's still a lot to run your head around.
Oh,
Um,
sure. Very, very,
but
very much so.
but the journey is amazing, and then the performances are amazing.
Did the journey in the TV series feel more epic than the video game? Because I heard the game itself was very epic.
There's something to be said for the visceral experience of playing the game. You're an active participant in the activities and the shocking scenes at the end of the game. Um, Somehow, I've heard people say that the TV episode seemed rushed, and I think viewing it without the control, it does seem more rushed. But I think without the experience of playing the game, I think someone would not necessarily feel it's rushed. At least that's my interpretation.
Gotcha. All right, Jennifer or Hideko, what about you guys? What drew you to the TV series? Because, were you thinking, oh, it's just another zombie tale? Or what were you guys?
You go first.
Okay, first is Hanako.
Hanako, sorry.
Pronunciation, yes, that's okay. Um, for me, I've never played the games. I had not heard a lot about the video game when the show came out. The big draw for me was listening to everyone else's hype about it once they announced that the show was going to get done. You had a lot of people who were excited, but there were also a lot of people who were kind of skeptical because, as we all know, video game adaptations don't always necessarily hit the mark. So, me being a Walking Dead fan and liking other zombie type shows, I was intrigued just for the concept of it, finding out that this virus is caused by a fungus. What? So that was the interesting part of it. And then, of course, Pedro Pascal, Bella Ramsey, huge fans of theirs from Game of Thrones. And I was really interested to see what they would bring to this show. And they did not disappoint. I loved it literally from the beginning all the way to the end. I didn't find a lot to complain about. And it was just a really well put together show. Yes, it did feel rushed in some instances, but not to the point where I felt like it took anything away from the story.
Gotcha. All right, Jen, what about you?
I'd heard about the video game. It sounded like it was a good story. I didn't know very much about it. I'm not super into zombies because I have a problem with cannibalism. I actually stopped watching The Walking Dead. I think in the second season, there was an episode that had particularly good sound quality, and I was like, I just can't watch this anymore. So I was a little nervous about it until I realized it was more about like transmitting it. You bite somebody so that they get it, but there wasn't like eating. But I gravitate
Until
toward,
episode 8.
yeah, but we still don't really. And even then, I was like, oh, but I gravitate towards bleak, depressing programming, and so I thought, oh, this fits the bill.
This is right up your alley. Awesome.
Yeah, like I went to Chernobyl kind of thing, right? Like bleak and depressing, more bleak and depressing because it's real. But yeah, no, I think I just gravitated towards it because it's the kind of thing that I like to watch.
No, totally understand that. See, for me, I actually didn't start it until like 3 weeks out, till it had been, because I had gotten burnt out with The Walking Dead. I fully admit it. I made it through all the way through the introduction of Negan, the whole thing with the whispers and everything. And then it just was like so bleak, so depressing. It was just like, there is no coming back from this. And I was just like, there's other things on TV I'd rather watch instead. And for me, it started being, I was still recording it, but I never went back to the DVR recordings of it. And so it was like, if that's the case, boom, it's gone. So that's how I gave up on it. And that's what I didn't go to The Last of Us. And actually, a lot of friends of mine were like, are you watching it? Are you watching it? The first episode is amazing, And I was like, no, not at all. And I was also worried about with Judy, because Judy's the same way. She doesn't, if animals get hurt, she doesn't care about people getting hurt or shot or whatever. But if animals get hurt, she walks away from a series. So like with Walking Dead, she made it through the first episode, and when they ate the horse, it was like, I'm out of here, goodbye, see ya. I'm not ever coming back to the series, no matter how good the series had gotten. And so she was worried with Last of Us. And so when a couple of her friends said, oh, you've got to watch this and such, I said, you want to give it a try? And we were hooked. We got caught up after episode 3, and it was just awesome to be able to. And yeah, it's post-apocalyptic, it's dystopian at its best. And I liked the concept of the virus, that basically that it's a fungus, and because it's based off true science, that there are insects that get controlled by fungus, like it's like a parasite virus, and it's pretty amazing. And I love that opening scene in the first episode with the scientists back in the 1960s, and it was just like, oh, this is going to be good. And like you said, Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal is just amazing in this story. The acting, there is no fault with any of the acting in this series. And you care for these characters. It took in episode 3 to one very minor character who doesn't even have any lines in the game. They did a full episode about about it and everything, which is just amazing. And I just loved what they did with Bill and Frank. That was just a great story. And and then you learn about the different the fall of society in the first episode, what Joel goes through in losing his daughter. And because you think, if you, since I didn't play the game, I thought Sarah was the Ellie character in this. I thought that she was going to be that's who he was going to be with the whole thing. And it was like, oh heck no. let's pull the wool over Mike's eyes on that one. So, and it was interesting with that. And I just love how they showed society fall apart, and it happened so quick.
But the thing also that I liked about it is that you can tell, I mean, and maybe it's because I'd heard about the game, the way that it's different for me from The Walking Dead is The Walking Dead was never, ever going to have any hope. It was just strictly about survival. And this whole series is about hope, trying to save the world because they think they can. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, even if it doesn't really work out that way at the end, and I don't know what the second season is going to be like, I'd heard some things from the nerds that I watch online, but it was always about people becoming people, not just, oh, what do we have to do now just to survive? Like it was better that way than The Walking Dead. Bleak, but still hopeful.
It was still bleak, and it was interesting because you got a lot of this show, you got to see through Ellie's eyes, because she was born after the collapse of society. She, she never experienced airplanes flying in the sky. She never really experienced being in a car. She never experienced, an escalator, at a shopping mall. And it was just really amazing.
Well, and that was speaking of the escalator at the shopping mall, that was the other thing that attracted to me, not the escalator, but the fact that I grew up in that whole area. I'm from Calgary, and I live in Lethbridge now. And at least one of the scene where they're, can't remember what episode, but they're walking, and then in the background, there's this elevated bridge that's partly broken.
Mm-hmm.
I drive by that every week when I take the kids back to their moms. So, yeah, I live here. Yep.
That's interesting. And the bridge is broken in real life?
No,
I know.
it's just for trains. There's like a big dip between one side of the city and the other side of the city. And it's not super steep, but the weather and the wind is poor enough that you drive one speed in the winter and another speed in the summer, but that's for trains. The one for, I don't know why they don't build one for cars, but that one is just for trains.
Well, I've heard, and, since you live in Calgary, and that, when they were doing Boston and they were walking, they said a lot of those buildings were Calgary buildings, and they just threw in with CGI some Boston buildings to make, say it's Boston.
Yeah. And some of them, I couldn't tell for sure, but in the first episode, there's a scene where the nerd guy that I watched said that it was all filmed in Fort McLeod, which certainly a lot of it was, but I'm pretty sure that it panned to a part of town called 17th Avenue, Southwest in Calgary, where there's a lot of the same sort of old buildings, and that you could see the actual Calgary buildings, but the CGI that they did was they cut off the top of them so they looked shorter. So they were buildings that I could recognize, but were half the height.
Gotcha. That's very interesting.
But,
Well,
some of them I had to look up because I was like, where is that? That looks familiar. I can't. Oh, I went to that place when it was a bar. So
yeah. So Matt,
Yep.
so let's hear from you. What did you think going into the first couple episodes? Let's go with the first two, with as they were building the world and putting it together. Your thoughts on that?
Well, there was a sense of dread, knowing what was coming, knowing, and there was hints of it, of the impending. Of course, these shows, they tend to do that because everyone goes into these shows knowing that the world's about to collapse, and you're just waiting for the power to cut out. You're waiting for the radio to cut out or the TV to cut out. You're waiting for planes to fall from the sky. You're waiting for fires in downtown areas. I mean, that's all the things they show when a society first collapses. But knowing that Joel's daughter is killed, knowing that you see neighbors turn, you see these things, it doesn't prepare you for the shock and for the horror of it. And so the one minor complaint is, and I think it's the second episode, they're just outside of Boston, but yet it looks very mountainous and very western in the areas outside of town. And people have commented on that. That seemed to have been a bit of a continuity gaffe because at that point in the story, they were not far out of Boston. But again, I mean, I don't worry too much about superficial stuff like that. The story, the resonance was there. And yeah, I mean, the first two episodes are pretty close to the game. It's really episode 3 where they make a major change.
Gotcha. Hanako, what about you?
I think for me, the interesting thing about the first few episodes, you understand that the story is going to be a character story, and you know that this is what you're tuning into. This seemingly cold and cut off, emotionless man who all of a sudden finds himself taking care of a young girl who may be the key to saving the world. That's going to be interesting enough. I really was interested to see how they plan to do the monsters in this show, because of course, we've seen so many different variations of zombies or monsters. And, again, mentioning The Walking Dead, this is something that I have watched for the last 10 years. And so you kind of get used to a certain way that they walk or a certain characteristic. And I had heard these things were a lot different. Like, people were telling me, you think you're prepared, but you're not prepared. Seeing what they were doing in the first episode was interesting because when you first see the grandmother attacking her daughter in the kitchen and she's coming up, I was kind of like Jennifer. I thought they were eating people, and I thought that was like hair in her mouth. And then when we were discussing it on our podcast, they were like, no, that's the cordyceps. Look closely. And when I looked at it, I was like, oh, wait, this is on a whole different level. I don't think I'm prepared for it. And then when you see them in 2 at the end, when, when they step on the little root or whatever you want to call it, and all of them just start swarming, I was like, oh, we're getting World War Z runners. Okay, that's the thing. I'm not prepared for that either. So it was interesting seeing the way that they develop these characters and the different stages that you get for these infected. The clicking was so unnerving for me. I had to pause the TV. I was like, there was something about it that just literally made it feel like something was crawling up my spine. It was so interesting because you don't really think about the noises, because again, most zombie shows, you have the groaning and the grunting or whatever, the mindless noise. So you don't think about any specific noise. When I heard that, I was like, oh, we are doing something totally different. And I don't know if I'm prepared.
Very much so. No, it was interesting too with that, because it was just like you hear, and it's just like the clicking noise. It's just like, oh, yeah.
Yeah,
was
even now I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it because that noise was so unnerving. I think the noise bothered me more than seeing the actual infected or the clickers because I had seen concept art and I'd seen what they looked like. So I was kind of prepared for that, but I wasn't prepared for the noise. I wasn't prepared for the actual click.
Okay. What were you going to say, Matt?
that was very key to the video game. Many of the game playing scenes involved you trying to get through or destroy or stealthily go through groups of clickers or other undead types. And the clicking was vital to locating where they were. It also added to the tension, added to the fright factor.
Mhm.
So it was a key ingredient in the video game, and I was glad to see they replicated it very well in the TV show.
No, that's pretty cool. Jennifer, what about you? The first couple episodes.
I liked the scene where like it's sort of building, so you kind of know what's coming, sort of what's coming when Sarah, is that the first daughter,
Yes.
like the daughter dies, and she's at the neighbor's house, and the old lady does that sort of weird thing with her head, and you're like, oh, it's starting here, kind of thing, and
Mhm.
yeah, it was. I liked watching it building, and because normally when I watch these sorts of things, like there's some sort of story ahead of time that I'm usually aware of so that I know what's developing. But they did a really good job here with those scientists that you were mentioning at the beginning, talking about, well, this is what it would look like. And then you're like, oh, look, this is what it looks like. So but the building was pretty good. Yeah.
I felt
I
in
also
that
thought that the girl who
that
played Sarah
scene.
looked like Zoe Saldana a little bit.
Oh, very much so.
Oh, yeah,
A little
yeah.
bit. It was interesting too. It was like that poor dog, why is the dog freaking out? Oh, it was just like, oh my God.
That
And
was the
everything.
thing. I was like, when the dog is looking at Nana like WTF, that's when you know it's time to leave the house.
Oh
It's
yeah,
time to
very much
go.
so. And then when uh Joel came with his brother, with Tommy, and picked up Sarah, and they like hit the guy who was coming after them with the car, and the neighbor ran out. Joel, what the hell's going on? And then
Jesus Christ,
and, and then Joel like tears out of there, and you see the poor neighbor getting attacked by the whole family, and it's just like, oh, poor sucker,
he
and
told her
everything.
to go back in the house.
Yep. He warned her. He warned her. You felt the tension building in this, and they did it so well.
Yep.
And then after poor Sarah was killed, you saw that Joel snapped. He lost it. And it was, it was interesting seeing, and then they did the time jump. You went up the 20 years. And you saw the kid coming out of the woods. It was just like, oh, somebody's coming out of the woods, and how the wonderful folks who, Fedra was just like, and the woman was so nice to the kid. Oh, we're just gonna, give you some medicine and everything. And then you see, the next scene, you're introduced to Joel again, and he's burning bodies, and you see one of the bodies he picks up is that little kid.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, I don't think I want to live in that world. No.
Yep.
I don't even
But
think I'd survive in it.
oh no, definitely not. But I think the thing that was different for me when you see Fedra and when you see the soldier and she's talking to the little kid and she's actually being nice and she's being calming. It's not a panic type thing. She's really trying to put this kid at ease and also staying calm about the fact that this kid is infected. They don't know how long he's been infected. They don't know when he's going to turn, but they know that it's coming. But instead of doing what we see in so many other shows, or even with what happened with Sarah, the soldier just panicking because at that point, they didn't know how this thing transmitted. They didn't know what they were dealing with. And that was the reason why he killed Sarah, because she was injured. He didn't know. Whereas now, 20 years later, you kind of know the signs and you know the timetable for when this infection happens.
A
And
lot
I
of people
think,
missed actually the chart that was on the wall behind
yeah,
her. Where in the body, if you get bitten, how long do you have?
And I thought that was interesting because the little kid actually paid attention to that chart. And then, of course, they mention, they show us his injury and they're like, how did you hurt yourself? And just the calming way that she took care of that kid, and instead of making it a panic, instead of them just like outright just, granted, yes, it's still murder, but I felt like it was more of a mercy killing at that point because they don't have a cure at this point, and they already know that this child is going to change. And rather than allow that change to happen, they kind of calm him down. They kind of ease him into it, and then they do what they need to do. So I thought that was a little bit nicer touch from what we're used to seeing when it comes to people dealing with this kind of panic. And again, just from a few scenes prior, when you see how Sarah's, injury was treated as opposed to this kid's, it was just kind of like a very stark contrast.
Well, Sarah's was, injury. She hurt her ankle, and
But the soldier didn't know that.
No, but the soldier was ordered to fire on both of them, no matter what. They could have been completely healthy, and it's the same thing we saw in episode 3, where everyone was being taken out of the small little towns, and then there wasn't room for them in the QZs. And so they were taken to the fields and they were shot, they were killed and everything, because there was no room for them to be under, the control of the government at the time. And so that's horrifying to me. It's just like, because you think, oh, I'm going to be taken to, get new home, put into, the safe city, safe using air quotes on that, folks. But it was interesting to see, so the whole thing with, when Sarah got killed, that was just a panic reaction. That wasn't even, and and Joel is trying to tell the soldier, hey, we're not infected, we don't have anything, but he was under orders and he was an idiot. But that's
something an infected person would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
Of course. Of course, that's rule number 1 in a zombie attack. I'm not affected. I have a gaping wound here, but hey, I'm not affected.
Right.
But it was interesting too. And then you meet of course Fedra, but then you also have the Fireflies, and it's just very interesting, the stark contrast. But you learn throughout the season the Fireflies aren't that great either at times. Right. And and it's just neat. It's not a perfect society, but you do find out from Ellie that there are Starbucks still in the QZ.
When did the game come out?
I think it just had its 10th anniversary. So I want to say around 2013 was when it first came out for the PS3.
I think that's what I remember reading as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because the characters, with Pedro and Bella, they look very, very close to what they look like in the game.
So this is just me speculating wildly, but were the creators of the game fans of Firefly at all? To create characters who are called Fireflies that we're supposed to look at as possibly the good guys, but who can also be bad guys and make different decisions. No,
I didn't even think about that.
In the interviews with Neil, I've never heard him make that connection. I mean, he's also, but he is heavily involved in the TV series. And if you watch the episodes on the streaming service, HBO has a information segment about the episode, like about each a 5 or 10 minute segment, and they're very worth watching. There's a lot of insight.
Okay,
and they talk about the creation, but no, the TV show Firefly actually has never come up with that connection. And they might have said something at a con or something like that, but never outright. But it's interesting because you have then, you have at first, you have Joel, and Joel has his partner at that point. And it's very interesting that you have, Tess, who, is, you think, oh, it's going to be the two of them taking Ellie across the country, or at first to out into Boston, so that way they can get a battery, because as Joel wanted to go find his brother Tommy, who has been missing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's interesting, the story from that point on, when they leave, it doesn't get any lighter after they leave the city at all.
No, it does not. It does not.
And everything.
But did you really expect it to?
No. No. And how poor Tess dies, because she gets bitten in an attack in the museum. And, but she's hiding it from them, because she didn't want them to know. And when they make it to, I guess it's Boston City Hall, and it's the fireflies there had been killed and been, some had turned into mushroom people, or some had been, just killed. And of course, right there, the whole plan fell apart. And then that's when Tess revealed that she had been bitten. And when they killed one of the other mushroom folks, that they find out, you found out that all the mushroom people are connected through it, like a network, which makes total sense. It's science right there. How
that is.
What were you gonna say?
Oh, that is a change from the video game. The whole, they had like the tendrils go out and communicated through that. That
Right.
was something that wasn't in the video game. That was added for the TV show.
Really? Well, also, I know from the video game, you have to be careful of being attacked by spores also. So that's also changed. So they make subtle changes, folks, throughout. And it's interesting too, because this is a lot of established science, and about the creatures, and about mushrooms, and about funguses, and such, which is interesting. And you then, because of the tendrils being attached, because one dies, it alerts the rest of the hive, and they come running, and boy, do they come running. They're not the zombies who are, no.
Those are the World War Z zombies.
Oh, big time. And so Tess makes the sacrifice, and my God, because she was trying to get that lighter lit before she turned. And then that one other walker, or clicker, as they call them, came, and it was spreading the tendrils out of its mouth into her mouth. It was just
Wow.
And then not only that, they give it to us in the close-up. So you're looking at it literally this close. It was, oh gosh.
Yeah.
That was just amazing. And, the sacrifice she made, and then that was the end of the episode pretty much, which was cool. It's interesting too, because you find out, in the first episode, that Ellie has immunity to the bites, but you don't know how at that point. Yeah. And you don't find out actually why until the final episode of the season. And, for how they did it was brilliant, that her mom was bitten while she was giving birth. So she was passed, the virus was passed through the umbilical cord, but she, because she was newborn, guess she was immune to it. And that was pretty well done. And it was neat how they incorporated the voice actors from the game into the series.
Yeah.
And you want to talk a little bit about that, Matt?
Yeah. Ellie's mom, her name was Anna, I think. That was not in the video game, but she was played by Ashley Johnson, if I got that right.
Yes.
I have my notes here, and she was the voice actor for Ellie in the video games. And the voice actor of Joel figures in episode, I don't know, 6 or 7, around that time.
Actually, 8. That's the
8.
one with the.
Yeah.
That was the one with the cannibals.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, yeah. And so they both had sizable and influential roles, and they interviewed them in the segments I mentioned on HBO Max. So it was good they were involved, but obviously, especially in the case of Ella, she had aged out of the role, obviously.
Right.
And plus, they wanted somebody with, I think, a little bit more higher profile for such a big role, high profile series.
Well, exactly, and the same thing with Troy Baker, because he looks similar to Joel, but not enough. I think Pedro hits it pretty much straight on, which is pretty interesting with that. So it's interesting though, from that they tie into the video game, and I think there's a couple other voice actors that they used in like the Kansas City episodes, and in a couple of the different other ones, which is nice homages to it. But I know starting with episode 3, when they introduce, of course, Bill and Frank, they go completely away for that episode, completely away from the games. And truthfully, the Bill and Frank episode was amazing. It was in such a bleak world, you got such a tender love story, which was awesome. It was beautiful, truly awesome.
I feel like that was probably one of the best love stories we've seen on TV.
Agreed.
So it was interesting that we got a story along with like that, because it made perfect sense how this story evolved with, having the Bill and Frank characters, because Bill was, basically a paranoid survivalist, and
a little bit.
just slightly. And it was pretty amazing to see. And you had, it was just beautiful. And I'm glad they barely had Joel and Tess barely in it. They were just almost like third person characters outside of it. And it was just very interesting the way they did that. And, but it furthered the story along too, because it showed what the world out there was like. Because, at the beginning of the episode, you were focusing on Ellie and Joel and coming to see, Bill. And it was just interesting because you saw the pile of bodies, you didn't know at the time what it was, or you saw a crashed airplane, and Ellie was like, oh, it must have been amazing to be up there in the airplane and to fly and, everything. And it and it was just seeing it through the wonder of it was just amazing.
Their story gave us hope for humanity, even though in a physical life or death situation, it could be bleak in that regard. Still, the fact that spark of humanity, that spark of love, could still survive, and it's a love that they probably wouldn't have met each other without the apocalypse.
No, exactly.
So there is a poetic beauty to that, and that episode was such a great add-on to the mythos. Their relationship was described in the game; we just didn't see it. Bill was still alive at the time he came to town in the video game. Frank had passed, but was mentioned. So they did change that, but again, the change was so much for the better for the story, and it was just beautiful.
So
it made me sad though, because I really wanted to see more of those characters. Like, I know that in the video games, I believe that Bill and Ellie actually meet and they interact, and I've been told that it's some of the best interactions in the video game. So I'm a little sad that we didn't get that in the show. But again, I really did love the Bill and Frank story. I thought it was beautifully told. And like you said, it does give you hope that even in this type of world, you can still find love, can still be happy, and you can still have a little bit of sense of normalcy.
I was about to say that exactly. That's very well
Yeah.
put and everything.
Yeah.
So then from Bill and Frank, they go to Kansas City, and that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
And it's the Kansas City situation was interesting because Fedra was gone. The people actually, the Fireflies got their freedom, but at a
Do we
cost.
know for sure that they were Fireflies?
I think they mentioned it, that they were
Okay.
part of but they weren't. They were just rebels at that point. They just they were building their own government and everything.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to see, but Fedra was gone. And, they had a very charismatic, how do you say it?
Charismatic. Charismatic.
One of those words I always have trouble with.
Say that 5 times fast.
Oh, hell no. I'm not drinking hard enough. But it's interesting because you had their leader, who was very, very popular, and he was betrayed. And basically you had his sister then take over, who was very vengeful. And it was interesting because that storyline, they added to it by, having, you had Henry, and Sam.
Oh.
And it was real interesting because Sam was actually played by a true death actor. And it was so well done. And the storyline, that, when they were that they couldn't go cut through town real quick because, Joel, was driving and the highway was blocked by trucks and everything like that. So they had to go through the city itself. And somebody was asking for help, and Joel passed them by because he knew it was an ambush, because he used to do the same thing with Tommy.
Yeah.
And poor Ellie was like, "Why are you stopping for that person?" And he's like, "Don't ask so many questions, kid." So, but
trust Joel.
And it was interesting because at that point, that's when Ellie saved Joel's life for the first time and everything. Because she grabbed one of Bill's guns in the previous episode. And
that was kind of where the bond really was starting to get solidified at that point between Joel and Ellie. I think Joel had always resisted trying to bond with Ellie, but at that point he had no he was happening whether he wanted it to or not.
Well, exactly. And it was interesting too, because before that she was just cargo. She was just a mission, and he didn't want his shell to be broken, and she started cracking it in with all those bad puns, with all those horrible puns, which was pretty cool. But it was interesting too.
Cool.
I had a son, so I heard most of those puns growing up. Dad, you'll never guess this one. What did the fish say when it hit the brick wall? What? Damn. so
Yeah, my own son tells those kinds of jokes too, and it's just like,
and he thinks he's the funniest guy in the whole world.
He absolutely does.
So that's why Ellie was perfect with that. But it was interesting, when you then got, you got Henry and Sam joining up with them, and and Henry was the one who ended up betraying, the Fireflies, the rebellion, whatever you want to call them, for the town, and betrayed the leader. And so the sister, who, was totally, was after Henry, and she was willing to sacrifice anything to get Henry, because, basically Fedra had, supposedly driven all the infected underground, and they hadn't seen them in years, according to the show. And when they were in the first part of that first episode of it, and you saw the floor, raising and everything, and so they were saying, I think we might have a problem here.
And she ignores
They
it.
knew. Yeah.
Yeah. She ignores it. She ignores it.
She knew what it was. She said, but she didn't want to create, like every leader kind of thing, didn't want to create a panic until she got what she wanted. The thing that I thought was interesting about all of that stuff was that everybody agreed that her brother was a great man and a nice man and always looking out for everybody else. But they didn't topple the terrible government until he was dead.
True.
She was the one who got everything going. And I kind of wonder if she hadn't been so, if she hadn't been so set on violence, what she could have accomplished, right? She wanted to kill somebody who had killed her brother, but her brother wasn't getting the things done that needed to get done. Those things didn't happen until she was around, right?
Yeah. But it's interesting because Kathleen, she had this sweet demeanor, and then cross her and she was like, get out of my face, type thing. And literally she and she was hell-bent that basically she was going to get Henry, and no matter what, and no matter who got in her way. And it was just very interesting to see. And then in the second part of the episode, when they made it through the tunnels, they made it out of Kansas City, and then that's that whole scene where they thought they were going to make it, and then the troops come in those almost like snowplows, pushing all the cars out of the way, and and basically, it was horrible. Joel was able to be a sniper and take out some of the drivers, but that just made it even worse because that poor snowplow found the weak point in the ground. And what came out?
When I tell you, when they started pouring out of the ground, I literally jumped up on my couch like something was on my floor. It was so horrifying. Like, again, going back to World War Z, I think that was the first zombie movie that I can remember where you see the undead run. Not just sprint, not jog. They are in a full-on Olympic run. And when those things started pouring out of the ground and that bloater followed, I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm dead right there. I don't have the stomach for this. I don't have the knees for this. I would be dead.
Oh, very much so.
Horrifying.
Yeah. I would be just staring at the cords as they just came at me. I'd be like defecated. I'd be everything. It would be like, no, nope,
be pretty.
I'm gone. It would not be pretty. And then the bloater to come out, and because that's the first time you see a bloater in the series, and wow,
that thing was horrible.
It had to be at least 8 feet tall.
Horrible, but horrible.
Yeah. Is that when you first see a bloater actually in the game?
It plays a little differently, but I think that area, that is about the time they make their appearance. I do know that they're kind of a boss enemy at first. Like you have to have plenty of ammunition. You sort of build up to the fight, and then you have that fight that sort of ends an act. But then later in the game, you face them a little more commonplace than you do when they first appear. But I think it's around that same time.
Gotcha. Because it was horrifying. And then the clicker, the little girl clicker that was after Ellie at first, and then poor Kathleen bit it. It was in the car. It was just like,
the little girl was scary and uncomfortable.
Yes.
Get it in the back of the truck. Yeah.
I wasn't sorry to see her gone. I wasn't sorry to
I wasn't.
see her gone.
I wasn't, because again, that singular focus, you got other people killed because you couldn't let go and you couldn't move on. And she even says when she's talking to Perry that Michael, her brother, told her to forgive Henry. And I think maybe, she talks in the episode about how Michael was the good one, he was the beautiful one, and she was not. I think her brother knew that if she got on this revenge path, she would never get off, and that would pretty much destroy everything that he had worked to accomplish. Not
Mhm.
only that, but it would destroy her as well. Maybe not in the sense that it actually happened, but I think he had the foresight to know, hey, you have to let this go because it's not going to end well if you keep on with this.
Mhm. It was interesting though because of, Kathleen's sense of justice and wanting to catch Henry. Was she just doomed pretty much the whole city of Kansas City,
Yep.
because if you think about it, she sent all the tough guys, everything to get Henry, and they all got destroyed by the horde. And
Yep.
that horde is still around, and they're not going to stop. They're now heading towards Kansas City. They're not just going to,
Mhm.
they're not just going to, oh, we're going to go back underground. See you later.
No.
Yep.
And so
They're going to
it
follow the noise, and the people who are in the city, they have no clue what's going on because they didn't even know that there was
horde
a
underneath
danger
the
of
ground.
them coming out. So yeah, that Kansas City is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's her legacy. She killed the whole city.
she destroyed it.
Hmm.
So the heartbreak of that episode, though, was at the very end, you know,
Sam.
and poor Sam and everything. And Ellie thought that she could actually, save him by, putting, like, she cut her hand and tried
Mhm.
doing like a mini blood transfusion type thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I knew it wasn't going to end well. I knew it when I saw that Sam had been bit. It was just
Hmm.
like
And Henry to be the one
tough
to
to kill
put him
him.
down. Elaine compared that scene to the Walking Dead episode, Look at the Flowers. If everybody knows that quote, the
Mm-hmm.
episode. And Elaine
Hmm.
said that's the last time she felt like that at the end of an episode was when we watched that Walking Dead.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I
It
could
was
see that.
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And then for Henry to then, Sam was the reason he was going, but he
Right.
did everything he did, and then that he was gone.
Yeah.
Why keep going?
Yeah. Yeah. Especially
So
when you think about what you did in order to protect your
Yeah.
brother. And, that whole conversation Kathleen had with him before, she said, did you ever think that Sam was meant to die? Like, kids die all the time. What is it about your brother that makes him so special that, basically you would kill mine in order to save him? And then at the end of it, he couldn't save Sam.
not
And
at
I
all.
just I felt that, when his instinct at first when Sam comes out and is attacking Ellie is to protect his brother no matter what his brother has become. And then it's almost like an instinct comes in, and his brother, there's this monster about to kill this little girl, and I think he instinctively reacts without realizing until it's too late exactly what it was he just had to do. And I think that realization was too much for him.
Oh, very much so.
So yeah, that was so heartbreaking.
And poor Ellie blamed herself, you know, for and that she left the note on his grave was
Mhm.
just that was just heartbreaking.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I know. And then you got, the scene, the next couple episodes, was another time jump because you went like 3 more months till they got to Wyoming. And it was interesting. And, we're not going to go blow by blow, folks. Don't worry. We're not, there's just, we're talking the high points of this. And it was great. You finally got to see Tommy and Joel the reunion. And it was interesting because, Tommy's grown up and Joel is still in the same place. So, and he wanted to continue, but he was like, he had gone through so much at that point with all the loss and everything he's seen. Joel, wanted to send, Tommy to take, Ellie to get, to the rest of the journey. And it's like, Tommy's like, no, I'm going to have my own family. I'm going to have a kid, and, when they were in Wyoming in Jackson, it was just almost like paradise compared to what they left.
Can you imagine if Tommy had taken her, Joel had stayed behind, Tommy had gotten to the hospital, understood what they were going to do, and was okay with it because that was really the only way that they were going to save everything, and then come back and tell Joel what he'd done? Can you imagine?
I kind of feel like, in a way, that's one of the reasons why Joel asked Tommy to take her. I mean, I know he gave his reasons about him not being able to do what he used to be able to do, but I think that was part of it as well. He knew at that point that he cared about Ellie and that she was becoming more important to him than he originally planned. His whole point was to stay distant from her, your cargo, not get attached. And I think he realized at that point, especially after what she told him about what she tried to do with Sam, I think in the back of his mind, he knew that there was going to be a point where he would have to give her up and she would not make it through this. And I don't think he was ready to face that.
I don't think he
would have been
knew
able
how
to
severe it was going to be, though. Yeah.
Well, so we talked about this. When you're talking about making a cure, there's only a couple of ways that this can go. Yes, they can do a blood transfusion and try to pull whatever it is in her blood out to see what they can do. But at some point, you're going to need more. And if you think about most shows and, medical procedures that we have seen, whenever it comes to something like that, those people are usually taken hostage. People are usually kept against their will. So they may not have known that she would die. But I think at some point they both understood that there was a possibility that she would not be coming back with them.
Well,
that she would have to stay.
I agree with
Maybe.
that. I do agree with that part, that she probably wouldn't be coming back. But I don't think Joel knew that they were going to kill her.
No, I don't think he knew that. But I think that he knew at some point he was going to have to let her go. Like wherever he took her to the Fireflies, I mean, the whole point was to take her so that she could do what she needed to do and save the world. He never planned for her to come back with him because he wasn't attached at that time. And I think he probably understood at that point that if he were to take her all the way, he wouldn't be able to just leave her there by that point. He would be completely connected, completely bonded, and he wouldn't be able to let her go. It's like, even if they said, okay, hey, we can keep her alive, we can do this cure, but she has to stay with us. I don't think he would have had it in him to leave her there and to go back to living a life having, quote unquote, lost another child. I think him asking Tommy was because Tommy had no emotional ties to Ellie. She had no bond. So he would have been able to, hey, drop her off at the Fireflies. Hey, I'm supposed to be bringing you this person. Now I can go on about my way, go back to my wife, go back to my unborn child. And he would have done it with no problem. And I think that was part of the reason why Joel may have asked him to do that, because he knew that Tommy would be able to do what he no longer could, which was leave Ellie behind, in addition to him not being able to do the physical stuff or the hard stuff, at least until we see what happens at the, the very last episode.
But do you think he would have been able to forgive Tommy? That was right. If Tommy comes back, and is like, yep, I left her there. She's going to save the world. That's one thing. Tommy comes back and is like, yeah, they had to take her brain out. That's something else.
I don't think he would have blamed Tommy for that. I think he would have blamed himself. He would have blamed himself for not seeing it through. I think he would have blamed himself for being a coward about it. And then if she would have died and he was not there, I think he would have blamed himself for that too. It would be like he said he was dreaming. I keep failing her over and over. It would have been another child that he would have failed, and I don't think he would have ever gotten over that.
Well, and maybe with time, I think, but he wasn't really very self-reflective until he'd opened up to her. I think people tend to lash out when they blame themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They blame other people for what they really know is their own fault.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting though too, because Ellie didn't know anything about Sarah until they got to Wyoming, because Joel never mentioned her.
Yeah,
right.
So
he always told her, we're not discussing that. Whenever it came to his life before, when it came to Tess, his relationship with her, he was always very threatening, like, no, we are not talking about that. But ultimately, the scene where Ellie goes off on him when she finds out he intends to have Tommy take her the rest of the way, that is another scene which is kind of blow by blow, exactly like it is in the game. And it's a very powerful scene. And at that point, I think any walls that Joel was trying to desperately keep up, I think he was already found himself starting to think of her as a surrogate daughter. But he was afraid of that. He was seeing the death. He saw what happened with Sam. He had known when he almost killed himself when Sarah got killed. He was afraid of that. He was avoiding that. But when she basically broke him down, when she didn't give him a choice, any pretense of a wall of her being cargo, the last vestige of that just went away. And he didn't have any choice at that point emotionally.
No, agreed with that. It's interesting because the last 3 episodes for me, they run together. It's all bop, bop, bop. And, it's interesting. And, they build a bond, especially, through these episodes, because you meet the cannibals, you get, they're attacked at the university and by the same group. And then Joel gets injured and Ellie has to take care of him. And it's interesting with that. And then when they finally get to Salt Lake City, that's like the final. And then, when Joel finds out what happens, it's like Joel becomes the Terminator in that episode.
Oh, and in the game, you are totally complicit in that act. And it's not like the game gives you a choice but to proceed in that direction. But you
can't just leave or whatever.
No, you
and
have
I hear
to.
that scene is longer in the video game as well.
Well, games tend to have the stealth scenes where you're going from room to room, avoiding detection, and that's not really extra story. It's gameplay necessity. But that scene, and it's almost shot. We have that hallway in the hospital, and at the end of that hallway is that room where the operation is getting ready to take place. And in the game, you've already, mowed down several of them, and what you're going to do in that. And you're more afraid of going in that door and doing what the game needs you to do than you are of any of these soldiers that have been trying to kill you throughout this level.
Right.
And it's an inevitability to it that is just it really messes with your brain a little bit, or at least it did with me when I played the game.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm very sure with that. And I'm sure it's tough because it affected us on screen, with what he was going through. And then, when he gets to the end and when they find, the base and, they get to there and they're about to leave the hospital and Marlene is there and like, hey, you're basically dooming us all if you take her, type thing.
And he knew that she would not stop coming after her, so he had to
kill her,
execute her. And there's no way to say it. That was a cold-blooded execution. And yeah, it's tough
because she wouldn't just let them go. She would be chasing after them, no matter what.
Well, and one of the things that I watched the Ryan Airy thing after the show was they were saying, I mean, I know it's a video game, right? Starts from a video game, and there's certain, you can't have a whole bunch of medical tests happen in a video game, but they were like, you would think that in real life, if you had the one person who was immune and you only knew that there was one person, that maybe you would run some tests before you went straight for the procedure that would kill the one person who might be able to save humanity. Maybe you should run some other tests. You could do some extractions for things, right? Maybe not just kill her right up front, just to figure out if maybe there was some, maybe you could culture something rather than like, because I mean, even they were like, they think, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay. I mean, most science like that, they think, right?
Yes, exactly.
So I mean, it's not the same. You don't have the same level of science and that kind of stuff, but you would think that it would be like, all right, so maybe we ought to just give it a couple of days, test some things rather than just, yeah, no, we were really nice to her. She has no idea what's coming. She's never going to wake up.
Not at all. She's gone. And it was like, no. There's definitely ways. And I watched the same thing that you watched and them talking about that, but in the video game, boom, they're gonna take her brain out, boom, good to get to the, and it's like no, because what if the brain wasn't it? Maybe it was her bone marrow, maybe it was something in her platelets or whatever, who knows. But it was, and then for when Ellie at the end looked at him and said, is Marlene still alive? Are they, were they okay with you leaving? And he lied to them right through the
lie.
Lie.
There was nothing else that he could say though, right? Like if he told her the truth, there's nothing for her to go back to anyway, because everybody is dead.
Yeah,
right?
But
he also doesn't want her to feel guilty.
Yeah, but I think he did more damage by lying to her about what happened, because let's be honest, Ellie is a smart girl. She knew when she woke up in that car and he told her that the drugs were wearing off, and she was like, what drugs? The last thing I remember was the fireflies, talking to the fireflies. And when he starts telling her about what happens, Ellie knew in that car what he did. You can't tell me that she didn't.
Yeah, and I think she knew when he lied to her, right? He gave her the opportunity. He gave her the opportunity to be willfully blind, and she took it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So they were lying to themselves and each other because neither one of them wanted her to die, really. I mean, she had a savior complex going on, right? Like my blood is medicine, that kind of stuff. And she kept talking about how she was going to save the world. But he gave her the opportunity to, but he told me that this was fine, right? Yeah. So she didn't have to believe what was really going to happen to her.
I don't know if I feel like that's what he was doing. I really think that in his mind, he feels like he was saving her.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I think he completely does.
I feel like it was more of a selfish thing for him. And I think when she says that to him and says, swear to me that what you told me about the fireflies was true, I think she really wanted to see how far he was willing to take that lie. Like, okay, we spent all this time, we've been traveling together almost a year at this point. We've built up this level of trust and respect for each other. Is he going to lie to me, or is he going to tell me the truth? And he lies. Doesn't even bat his eyelashes, doesn't blink. And I think her in that moment was accepting. He killed everyone. He took away my one true purpose, and then he lied on top of it. So I think at that point, that wall for her has now gone up. So where we started the season with Joel having the wall and her trying to break in, I think now we're about to see a complete reversal where she's going to be the one that's closed off to him now, because she's now been betrayed by the one person she loves in the world. And it's going to have huge repercussions for both of them going forward.
Apparently, that's part of the second season. Is
Stop
the
smirking,
revealing
Matt. Stop smirking.
Yeah, I don't. I have
the
no
revelation of the
clue.
lie. But
I know nothing about the second game. Nothing. So I don't know. I don't know anything that's happening. I don't want to know.
But I'm
my hands in my
certain
ears.
that he was doing it for himself, right? That he, you know, loved her and wanted to keep her alive. But I still think that, like, it can work both ways, right? He can tell her that because he wants to keep her alive, and she can accept it because it's easier for her than to believe that now she's never going to save everybody.
It's interesting.
And that's a huge thing to overcome, especially when you grow up in the conditions that you grew up in. You grew up with no parents. You grew up in an orphanage, no love. The one person who we find out has known her since birth has completely ignored her for the most part for all of her life. So she thinks that she has nothing else. She has nothing of worth for herself until, you know, she's told that, hey, you can become a leader with Phaedra. And she thinks she's going to do that. And then, you know, this one night out with her best friend completely changes the course of her life. Then she finds out, oh, you're immune. So guess what? Now you can save the world. It's hard to not expect her to have a hero complex, because at this point she has had nothing else in her life that meant anything to her. You know,
well, and maybe it's a relief to her now that she doesn't have to have the whole burden of saving the world, because he told her they've got dozens of other people and they've stopped looking for a cure because they can't find it. So it's not on you anymore. So now she can just live her life.
I don't think that she believes that.
I don't think she believes it.
No, I don't either.
I agree.
But people will tell themselves things like, well, no, I mean, I don't really believe it. But I mean, we've all been in relationships, right? You know, like, I don't really believe what that person said, but they told me, and I've been with them for a long time, and they haven't given me a reason not to trust them before. So I'm going to trust them now, even though when I check their phone in 6 months, I'll be able to see they were totally banging that other person.
Well, okay. So we've talked about all the positives, and there were tons and tons of positives. Let's look real quick, and let's make it very quick. What would you have changed of anything? You know, any negative? Let's start with Matt.
I would have liked to have seen a couple of story beats gone a little longer, including, I think the scene in the hospital where they were, is it Utah they were at, I believe?
In Salt Lake City, yeah.
Salt Lake City, yes. I think that would have been that was really 2 episodes worth of material, and they could have put the flashback. They still had the flashback in there with her mom, that was
a nice cold open, actually.
Yeah, it was, and that's actually something else that wasn't in the game. So I think they could have expanded on that, and also the scene that led to it at the college, in Colorado. I think
the escape monkeys, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, some of that was, it did feel like they were kind of getting close to the end and they had to kind of rush. Because there's a lot of story between Frank and Bill and before they get to college. There's a lot of story in there that's barely touched upon in the TV show.
Okay.
But then it would have been 25 episodes, and who does 25 episode seasons?
Not anymore.
No. So, but apparently they do intend to stretch the second game into at least 2 seasons.
That's what I've heard.
So I'm grateful at that, because it would be even tougher. And
I'll be very curious to see where they go from there.
Yeah.
So, all right, interesting. All right, Jennifer, what about you?
I actually like most of it. the only thing that really sort of bugged me is really not any fault of the show, is that because I recognize so many of the places that it's set, it takes me out of the show. That's all.
Huh. Most definitely. It was the same way when we just saw Shazam a couple weeks ago. And, when they were in the park at the parking structure, and it was definitely not Philadelphia, it was downtown Atlanta. It's like, oh, it was like, wait a minute, there's the Westin, there's the Marriott, there's the Hilton. It's Dragon Con all over again. Exactly.
Well, it's like when Matt was talking about the college, I was like, oh, SAIT. That's the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. And then like all the things you were talking about, I was like, oh, and that was here, and that was here. And so it just kind of takes me out of the.
Makes total sense. Yeah. Okay, Hanako.
I don't have any complaints. Like I said, I was not familiar with the game before, so I had no expectations going into the show. And I really don't have any complaints, except that maybe they could have stretched it to maybe 11 or 12 episodes. Giving us a little bit more story, but I have no complaints about this show.
Awesome. For me, I wanted to see more. I wanted to see, at least maybe 2 or 3 more episodes. But I was very thrilled with what we got. And folks, sorry for this episode going a little bit longer, but we barely scratched the surface on this. It was really tough not to. So please watch it. Let us know what you guys thought. Did we miss any huge talking points or anything? I'm sure we did. But, there's also podcasts out there who dedicate an hour to 2 hours for each episode. So it's super simple. This is the condensed, version of it, super condensed, the Cliff Notes, you could say almost. So it's pretty awesome. Let's take a quick break and we will be back in a moment. All right, YouTube people, thank you for sticking with us, and thank you as always for watching us. Tonight's discussion actually is, Last of Us was a video game adaptation. Are there other video games out there that could do as good of a version of this? Because they've done other storyline, other, video games, based off of it. And I don't think they've come close to this kind of level of, perfection. Is there anything any of you guys out here would want to put out there?
Well, I'm disappointed a little bit in the movie version of Uncharted, because this is the other cinematic series done by Naughty Dog that I think would lend itself to this type of treatment. And they tried to tell a little different story in the style of Uncharted in the movie, and the movie's not horrible, but I'd hate to think that they did that instead of doing something really better or more in depth like they did with The Last of Us. I'm kind of disappointed they didn't go more of that route with Uncharted.
Mm-hmm. No, I could totally see that. And, it wasn't a horrible movie, but if that's another one, if you didn't know it was a video game, it would have been just an action adventure movie type thing.
I didn't know it was a video game. Should I watch it and then report back?
You can write something for the website about it. There you go. Okay. So it would be pretty awesome. I could see them doing like a Legend of Zelda movie or series. Might be pretty cool, especially based off the newer games.
Yeah, I think so.
And so I think there's a lot of possibility with that. I think it would be pretty cool. And also I would love, I was a huge fan of Portal, and on the computer, and it's a great game, and there's such a rich story with that, especially with Aperture Science, and all the experiments and such they've done with it. I think could be pretty cool to do,
and everybody can look forward to cake at the end of the movie.
Of course, you get a piece of cake. You get a piece of cake, as you're walking out of the theater. So
yeah.
But it's a lie. Just always remember that the cake is a lie. So I remember when William got a portal gun for his birthday one year, and it was the one that changed colors and everything. And he was just thrilled, and he took it to Dragon Con. He dressed as one of the scientists with the portal gun. And we actually ran into Grant Imahara from Mythbusters, and he was fascinated with William's gun, with his portal gun. Yeah. So it was pretty awesome. So it was neat. But yeah, I just think, I think this is going to open a floodgate of new projects. I'm sure we're going to see more like that.
More prestige, more serious. Yeah, I mean, because I think video games, I think people underestimate some of the storytelling going on in some of the better games right now. And I think this TV show, it maybe introduced people just what kind of stories could be told. Not every video game, of course, but some. So I hope this does lead to better adaptions of video game properties.
Sure. It's going to be interesting, though, because, we're going to get a lot of schlock, too, out of it, because you always do.
Yeah.
And that's what I worry about.
Just like real movies.
Exactly.
Resident
exactly.
Evil, yeah.
How many Sharknado ripoffs were there? Or, how many,
Not enough.
Cyber Gator versus,
Oh my God.
Crocopus or whatever it was, or, whatever.
I hear Cocaine Bear is very good. I want to see that.
Oh my God, not you too.
And that's why there's an audience for that, folks. It is pretty darn awesome. So yeah, there's tons of stuff out there that you could play around with, and and I'm still here podcasting. I should be writing these things, writing these rip-off movies and everything.
Get to it, Mike.
I do. I should be, and then I could say, "You guys host. I'm going to go write my next blockbuster, schlock movie that's on the Sci-Fi Channel, or excuse me, Siffy." So,
Siffy.
yes.
So you got a full-time job, Mike. You watch all these shows and movies. You do how many podcasts a week? Do you sleep, Mike? I don't understand it. I don't see how you could do it.
Well, and I'm going to be starting a travel agency soon, so we have to definitely see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait and see what happens next.
Wow.
So sleep, it's overrated. As they say, I don't need to sleep. I'm quoting Joel from The Last of Us.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's funny too, though, with The Last of Us. Judy will not touch her mushroom ever again. She's like,
I have not had that problem, I will say. I've not had that problem.
She's like, nope. When we get pizza, when we go out to Italian, nope, or salad bar, nope. Please let them take the mushrooms off. Nuh-uh.
I had fried mushrooms just the other day.
And you still haven't started going.
Nope.
No.
Okay.
I saw a clip the other day with Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about the genetic relationship between mushrooms and people and plants, and said that mushrooms are more closely related to human beings than to green plants. And that's possibly why they taste meatier than regular plants. And then I was like, ugh.
Well, in the show, actually, it's actually the yeast and the bread products, that type of fungus which infects us. It's actually not the mushrooms.
Yep.
No, we didn't even talk about that scene that was in Asia at the cold opening that they did there.
Oh yeah, that was awesome. When she just said basically kill us all. Yeah.
Blow us all up, there is no escape from it.
Yep.
Yeah, she played that scene brilliantly, because it's like she was so calm about it, because she knew there was absolutely nothing that could be done. Just like the scientist said in 1968, he was like, "Oh, if cordyceps takes over, we're done. If we get a fungal, no, it's over."
Yeah.
And
if they evolve, if the world gets warmer, that's not gonna happen. No.
Yeah.
God, I was depressed after that. I'm not drinking this episode. Damn it. No. Oh, well, thank you, YouTube folks. We do appreciate you guys for listening to us rant for a bit. Last of Us, I think, is going to be sticking for quite a bit. Do you think it's going to be, like they said, the second and third season is going to be the second game? And do you think they can continue past that? Do you know if they're going to planning a third game, or is that it?
Yeah, there is a third game. Well, it's been talked about, but also Neil, who's the main creator, apparently they're making another game, but it's not Last of Us 3. I could see a very Game of Thrones kind of situation here, where we're waiting for another book, but the show's going to catch up, and they have to decide: are they going to do their own thing? Are they going to continue? Yeah, they're going to come up on that pretty quick, I think.
Well, they've already said that they are not taking the show past where the games are. They have said that much. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
That's the best decision, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's a very good decision, and I'll be very curious to see where it goes. But I could also see spin-offs from this too, because they've introduced certain characters in this season, and also what's to come. You could definitely have multiple people and stuff like that. So it should be very interesting to see.
I'd watch a Frank and Bill sitcom.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
Yes. I
think that would be a very, very interesting series.
I would watch a Frank and Bill whatever.
Yes.
Touche. I agree with that completely.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's wrap this up. Let's get out of here. So that's going to wrap up another episode of the Earth Station One podcast. Let's thank everyone for being here. Hanako, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me back. It was fun.
Anything you want to promote, like your podcast or anything?
Sure. I am the host of the Phantom Hybrid podcast. We are one of those podcasts that Mike mentioned earlier that does dedicate episodes to The Last of Us. We have talked about all 9 episodes individually. And we had a bonus episode where we talked with some gamers about how they, felt about the show and what they liked and didn't like. So you can check us out at www.phantomhybrid.com. We are also on YouTube. We have a Discord channel at Phantom Hybrid, and you can find us on all podcast streaming platforms.
Awesome. That's awesome. And it's a great show. I've subscribed, and I'm having a ton of fun listening to it, folks. It's pretty cool. So it's definitely worth checking out. And Miss Jennifer, thank you as always.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be back on there. I haven't anything of my own to promote, but I have recently been watching on YouTube. Not a nerd exactly, but a guy who's been cooking, anti-chef. His most recent things is going through The Art of French Cooking by Julia Child, but he's been cooking in other places too. He has these little things, are like 5 to 15 minutes. And one of the things my boyfriend's really impressed with is he makes mistakes and he keeps them in there. He's like, I would never do that. I would just be like, I'm redoing this whole thing so that it looks perfect. But he doesn't do that at all. The guy's funny. The food looks good. If it's not good, he's pretty clear about it. And very honest about his approach to things.
Very cool. I think that's pretty awesome. And Mr. Matt Sweatman, thank you as always, sir.
Well, since Mike's not here, so I will say it's my pleasure. Mike Gordon.
Anything you're going to promote, sir, or talk about?
I am fairly active on Facebook. Me and my wife Elaine, we currently watch Star Trek episodes, and when we watch an episode, we kind of live comment, almost like live tweeting, but we're on Facebook. We have some friends at Earth Station Trek, another ESO Network podcast, and occasionally we've been on a few episodes of that, and we comment on there, and it's really gotten me back into Star Trek, and Elaine kind of into Star Trek for the first time. So anybody who has any interest in that area, feel free to check it out. It's really some cool stuff.
Nice. And you guys do great jobs. And it's like, how many episodes of Star Trek are you guys watching a week? It's like, I keep on seeing you guys post more and more. It's great though. I'm glad you guys are doing that type of thing.
It's a lot of fun.
Very cool. My shout out real quick is going off to, of course, live music. What can you say? I love going to concerts. I try to go see, concerts whenever we can. This upcoming weekend, as of this recording, it's, we record in the past, put out in the future, wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. You know how it goes. It's pretty cool. We're going to a charity event over in Lilburn, Georgia. It's for the music school they have there, and a band I follow called Donna the Buffalo is actually playing there and they're doing a charity gig. It's already sold out, folks. So, and by your time you're listening to it, it's in the past. So, but if you ever get a chance, try to go see live music. I think right now we have eight different shows we're going to in April, and throughout the month, and that includes a music festival at the end of the month that we're going up to North Carolina to go to. So it should be always tons of fun to see live music. It helps support the bands themselves because they don't make money anymore from their CDs or their music being played and streaming or on the radio as like they used to. They get most of their music and money from concerts, and a lot of the smaller bands, they don't charge more than $30 to $40 a ticket, and that's including the fees and such. So definitely check it out, and then pick up some swag, because that's where the money they make any money, because that's how they do it. And that's why you see a lot of these bands on the road almost the full year and such, trying to promote their stuff. And and it's just a ton of fun to go see these bands, and you get to meet I've met tons of new friends. You meet people who have similar interests, or you just meet very cool people when you're listening to cool music. It's pretty cool stuff. So definitely check it out. It's worth it. Definitely, we're gonna have music with the weather getting warmer here. It's outdoor concerts, and the pollen hopefully will eventually disappear, because the yellow snow, as we like to call it here in Georgia, is still around, but eventually will fade and go away. But as always, my friends, thanks for listening to the Earth Station One podcast. Always remember that we couldn't do this without you. If you want to support the podcast, please check out our Tee-Public store and get some cool ESO swag. Also, remember, if you want to listen to our shows before the rest of the world, why not join the ESO Network Patreon? For as little as $1 a month, you can help support us here on Earth Station One. Just go to patreon.com/ESO Network. We also want to hear from you, so please write us anytime at feedback@earthstation1.com. Remember, you can find Earth Station One wherever fine podcasts are found. Now, Earth Station One can also be found in video format up on YouTube. Please subscribe and tell all your friends about us. Like and subscribe, folks. Like and subscribe. It's right there, right under here if you're watching us on YouTube. Just hit subscribe. Click on the bell, so that way, we're coming to you now twice a week. So definitely check us out with that way. Of course, I'm not too proud to beg on the show, but of course, thank you guys very much for joining us. On behalf of myself, Mike Faber, Mr. Matt Swetman, Miss Jennifer Wees, and Miss Hanako Ricks, thank you as always very, very much for joining us. We'll see you here next time on Earth Station One. Peace, have some fun, and go see some live music, and stay away from mushrooms. Talk to you later. Peace, and we are done. Ciao.